Welcome to another episode of the Fertility Conversations Podcast. One of the areas that of concern for people exploring or looking to do frozen embryo transfer is that, what should I be eating? What should I avoid? Should I be doing further testing? Maybe things like vaginal microbiome testing or not. So people just want to ensure that they have the right information and well prepared before going for that frozen embryo transfer. So, which is why it's great to have you here today with us, Sarah, to come answer many of our questions. I'll do a brief introduction about you, and then we can go into the questions. Sarah's joined us before, a few episodes before, talking about importance of nutrition and the impact that it can play in our fertility. But today we want to speak more about frozen embryo transfer, how to prepare, and also to ensure that the vaginal microbiome is all in a good place before doing that transfer. And as she said to me in a private conversation also, she noted that that's also important for people that are trying to conceive without fertility treatments. So it helps for everyone looking to conceive, regardless of the option you're opting for. So Sarah is a nutritional therapist with nearly 20 years experience working within complementary health industry. She has a nutritional therapy practice in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and she also supports individuals from around the UK and around the world looking to improve their health with dietary and lifestyle changes. Today, like I said earlier, she'll be answering many of our questions about getting us ready for conception. So welcome, Sarah, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me again, Ola, having me back to talk about some things that we didn't get covered the last time.
Exactly. So I wonder if you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself. I noted some of the information from your bio, but if there's anything else you want to add before.
Yeah, I'm obviously, as you said, nutritional therapist. I love helping people sort of support overall health, but obviously I have a specific interest in supporting couples improve their fertility, reproductive health, and support them through all different stages of the fertility journey, whether that be trying to conceive without assistance or assisted conception, such as IVF, and looking at how different dietary approaches and focusing on different areas of your diet nutrition can support those different stages, be it sort of prior to sort of IVF, maybe supporting egg and sperm quality, and then going through the different stages, then possibly how you might then approach frozen embryo transfer, what might change, what different areas you might need to focus on at the different stages of the IVF process. So that's a really interesting area where there's quite a lot of really good research on how nutrition can help. So for me, that's really interesting, and sometimes just very straightforward, simple changes for diet, specific supplementation, maybe one or two tests can really help ensure success in frozen embryo transfer, because it's such an important factor to look at. It can be expensive, very expensive if you're self-funding. So you want to optimize your chances of that frozen embryo transfer being successful. And there are some very simple and straightforward things you can do to improve that. So it's a really interesting area for me.
Wonderful. And we love that to know more about the simple things we can do and the changes that we can make when trying to prepare for frozen embryo transfer. So some of the things, firstly, is that how long before the frozen embryo transfer should we start making these changes, like the dietary changes, supplements?
Yeah, well, ideally, most people would have made dietary changes prior to embryo collection, because you would have been making a lot of positive dietary changes to ensure good egg quality, prior to egg collection and embryo development. So a lot of those changes would still be relevant for frozen embryo transfer. So we always say 3 months prior to embryo collection, egg collection, you want to be ensuring you're following good dietary practices that are going to ensure good egg quality, such as an antioxidant-rich diet, which we talked a lot about in the previous podcast, Ola. Avoiding sugar, for example, and refined carbs. So those changes really still stand. So I really just say to people, keep going with those changes. You
Right.
should have made those changes 3 months prior to egg collection. Just keep going with that really positive, approach to your diet in between egg collection and frozen embryo transfer. But for example, for someone who has had their embryo collected a long time ago, maybe they've had a break from IVF for various reasons. Understandably, it can be very stressful going through IVF. Some people like to give themselves a bit of a break. Now and again, they've maybe had a hard time, take a few months to just kind of, decompress, not worry about it. Sometimes that can be really healthy mentally. So again, you'd look at another 3 month period, at least prior to frozen embryo transfer, to make sure you're in a very healthy place nutritionally. Okay, we aren't obviously focusing on factors such as egg quality, but still there are other factors that we want to focus on in the body, that it can take up to 3 months to see positive changes there. Generally, in all areas of nutritional therapy, you're talking about a period of 3 months to see lots of real positive change in specific areas. So that 3 month period still generally stands. So but instead of maybe focusing on egg quality, we would be looking at things like enhancing your nutrient levels, those important nutrients that are really important to pregnancy, because ideally at the end of the frozen embryo transfer, you're going to have a healthy pregnancy. So we'll be looking at making sure you've got enough of those nutrients that are really important for healthy pregnancy. Omega-3 fats, vitamin D, zinc, selenium, iodine, really key for women, really important one. So, maybe making sure you're focusing on getting enough of those from your diet, but also using a high quality fertility supplement that's going to make sure you've got enough of those. I forgot to mention folic acid, folate, for example, So again, 3 month period, making sure you've got healthy levels of those that are going to be both maybe be conducive to transfer, but also then support a healthy pregnancy, making sure your body's in a really good place. You're also going to look at foods that support circulation, a really important area, because that's going to be delivering nutrients to your cervix for implantation, nutrient levels, oxygen, making sure you have a lovely kind of womb lining that's really healthy. So all these foods and nutrients that support circulation. And we're also looking at foods and nutrients and an approach that reduces inflammation, because if there is sort of an imbalance in your levels of inflammation in the body, that can interfere with chances of implantation, conception. So it's a big picture, but and I've answered. It's taken me a long time to answer your question, but generally, yes, 3 months, Ola.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, what the information you provided is really helpful, because that's part of the concerns and what we worry about. And so 3 months, as much as possible. Now, in terms of what we should be eating and not eating, one of the concerns is that should we be taking, I mean, we know that they say reduce coffee, but can cappuccino every now and then, can that have any negative impact? And obviously it contains milk. Some people say that milk has inflammatory attributes or not. So
well,
what are your thoughts?
Definitely, the inflammation side of things is a very important one. And for the important thing to understand with this sort of, I say it's a bit of a misconception that dairy can be pro-inflammatory, is that dairy can be pro-inflammatory for some people if they are sensitive to it, but not everyone is. So for everyone to go out and cut out dairy, I don't agree with that approach, because that's sort of a one-size-fits-all approach to nutritional therapy, which, your nutritional, the nutritional approach for you should be very individual. Everyone's needs are different. So, Ola, for example, you might be sensitive to dairy products. I might not be. For me, dairy products therefore would be a very important source of important nutrients like iodine, which I mentioned. Dairy products are a very important source of iodine in our diet, which is a really important nutrient for healthy conception and healthy pregnancy in women. And a lot of women are deficient in iodine. So for me, that's quite a problematic message to say dairy products are pro-inflammatory, avoid dairy when you're preparing for conception. Whenever I'm working with a client who is, preparing for conception, frozen embryo transfer, and I suspect there may be a dairy intolerance for maybe certain reasons that might kind of red flag it to me.
Right.
Maybe there was a history of dairy intolerance as a child. They have eczema or some other condition like eczema, skin condition, or maybe they have IBS. I will generally test for a
Right.
food sensitivity to determine whether it is present. And it's only really under that circumstance that I am happy to then go ahead and say, let's cut out dairy. But at the same time, if I'm working with a client and I've recommended cutting out dairy, I will be making sure that I would be meeting any nutritional gaps from cutting out dairy with either supplementation or dietary changes to make sure that we're not missing out on important nutrients like, iodine, B12 that they might be getting from dairy products in their diet. So yeah, I have a bit of an issue with, some of this messaging that, dairy is pro-inflammatory, avoid dairy. For some people, yes, but that could be 25% of people. The other 75% of people could easily continue with their dairy consumption. So for me, that's a really important area to understand. And then moving on to caffeine, in my my attitude towards caffeine is that you don't want to take any caffeine after a frozen embryo transfer. So basically, at any point that you could be pregnant, avoid all caffeine. In the run up to frozen embryo transfer, I think it's important to be significantly reducing your caffeine intake from all sources, because if you're drinking 5 cups of coffee a day, that can deplete nutrient levels. It can be a stressor on the body, leading to like adrenaline release. So, you want to be definitely looking at maybe reducing it down to 1, maximum 2 caffeinated cups of coffee or tea a day, so that your caffeine intake is significantly low, because beyond that could be leading to depletion of key nutrients in the body. On the other hand, though, you also want to look at what your caffeine-free alternatives are and the quality of them as well. So if you're choosing decaf coffee or decaf tea, it's important to look at organic decaf tea, organic decaf coffee, because if you aren't choosing organic, decaf coffees and teas can be sources of kind of chemicals, because they use chemicals to decaffeinate them if they're not organic. So it's really important for my clients that I would source and recommend organic decaf tea, organic decaf coffee, or naturally decaf teas, like for example red bush tea or something like that, instead of going to Starbucks and asking for their decaf coffee, for example. Might not be the best thing to do when you're trying to kind of support your reproductive health.
Good to know. Thank you for sharing that. And really helpful again, because you're further reiterating the point that nutrition should be personalized, and we shouldn't just read stuff off the internet and just say that worked out for that person, then I should be doing the same. But because everyone is different. So really important.
Exactly. And I always think there is a lot of nutritional advice out there, and it can be overwhelming, and it can be very difficult to then, figure out what applies to you out of all this information. I always just think, anyone who's handing out nutritional advice online, if they are sort of promoting this kind of one size fits all message, like, oh, everyone should avoid dairy, for me, that would be a red flag. I would never put up a post on Instagram saying everyone should avoid dairy. So for me, that's a red flag about their advice and about their credentials, really. So that's always a kind of a good approach to take.
Yeah, good to know. Thank you. And now, in talking about avoiding certain teas and the decafs not to take, what can we take? I mean, in terms of like, if there are teas that might help to actually help to aid with frozen embryo transfer before or after?
Yeah, well, definitely. One tea that's excellent is actually hibiscus tea. Hibiscus is a flower that you can then make into a tea. It's got quite a mild flavor, like really quite pleasant. For people that maybe don't really like herbal teas, it would be a really good option because it doesn't have a strong flavor. Hibiscus would be really excellent. It actually enhances blood dilation and blood flow, and that's a really important consideration around embryo transfer, that you want to enhance blood flow to the reproductive organs to support nutrient delivery, oxygen delivery to the womb for promoting healthy implantation. So generally, these foods that enhance blood flow, like hibiscus tea, I generally recommend clients increase those in their diet. Sometimes the whole way through their fertility journey, but also specifically in the 2 weeks before frozen embryo transfer and the 2 weeks after. Having lots of these foods that are promoting blood flow, healthy blood flow, is really going to help. There is some kind of research on the topic. So hibiscus tea would be excellent. If you live in a hot country, it can be made into like an iced tea, just make it up and let it go cold. It's quite pleasant then, with ice. So if you think, drinking 3 cups a day, which is what I would recommend, 3 cups of hibiscus tea a day. If you think drinking 3 cups a day would be problematic, you can let it go cold. Another herbal tea that would be quite beneficial would be ginger. That's also really good at promoting circulation. It's a natural anti-inflammatory as well. So that would be another nice one, but kind of top recommendation would be hibiscus tea.
Good to know. Thank you for sharing. And of course, you mentioned earlier as well about supplements. There's certain supplements that we should be exploring or considering for frozen embryo transfer.
Yeah, well, generally, like a good quality fertility multi should be, you should have been taking it for a few months before embryo transfer anyway, especially to see the benefits. But a good quality one that is going to be providing you with kind of minerals such as zinc, for example, iodine. So obviously preparing the body for a healthy pregnancy. I would also recommend a really good omega-3 fat supplement. Again, omega-3 fats have lots of benefits for fertility health. Some that would be specific around frozen embryo transfer, such as promoting healthy circulation, good blood flow around the body. Omega-3 fats, also naturally anti-inflammatory, so increasing your omega-3 status in the run-up to embryo transfer, and then obviously during pregnancy, is very, very important. And when you're trying to conceive, and also during pregnancy, it is recommended that you avoid too much oily fish in your diet, because oily fish can actually be a source of toxins such as heavy metals. So it's recommended, the guidelines are really no more than 1 serving weekly, because in excess of that could be a source of heavy metals. So for my clients, I generally recommend that they don't have any more than 1 serving weekly. So we do have to then look at an omega-3 supplement, and a high quality one that has been screened for heavy metals, not a bargain basement one.
And there's some specifically that you recommend, or you rather not?
A specific brand which is really good. It's called Bare Biology. It's all screened for heavy metals.
Right.
So that's a really good company, and they do some products specifically for kind of fertility and pregnancy. So they're really, really excellent. So you really have to look at a quality supplement for your omega-3 sources of your diet during pregnancy, because you can't eat an abundance of oily fish. So that's a really important one. And then vitamin D, really important for showing increased chances of implantation and conception. I generally would recommend vitamin D testing, and then using that test result to determine a good vitamin D supplement to make sure you're going into pregnancy with really healthy vitamin D levels. As I said, vitamin D has very important role in the body in controlling inflammation and supporting immune system balance, which can help support conception. So vitamin D, another one I would recommend, sort of. But I do generally say start with testing, find out what dose you need, and then move on from there. And lastly, another supplement that has been shown to be quite positive would be coenzyme Q10, which is, there's some clinical trials that indicate that it can sort of thicken the endometrium lining, which can then support healthy implantation. But always follow guidance from maybe your consultant or your doctor with dosages. Some people can recommend very, very high dosages of CoQ10, which I don't agree with necessarily. So I've seen some people maybe being on like 600 milligrams, 700 milligram. I don't think that's always necessary for everyone. So a moderate dose of CoQ10, and that can really, really help. And again, just that maybe 2 months of that could be enough to really support implantation as well. So
good to know. Thank you for sharing that. Really helpful. And of course, another aspect when you're trying to prepare for frozen embryo transfer on Google, there's always the conversation about eat lots of beetroot, take pineapple core right after transfer,
Yeah.
and which one of these is actually reality and, backed by evidence, and which
Yeah.
one should we be avoiding?
Well, definitely the beetroot one would be my main recommendation. And again,
Right.
that links to the hibiscus, because
Ah,
in the beetroot and hibiscus, it's the same compound, or similar compounds that have a similar effect on the body. They enhance something called nitric oxide, which helps to dilate our blood vessels and support healthy blood flow around the body. So, in the same sort of vein as recommending the hibiscus tea, I do also recommend things like eating beetroot. So purple foods, like beetroot, can really help with this nitric oxide. So beetroot, blueberries, pomegranate, all your blackberries are
what about the
very,
purple cabbage?
yes, it's a
Yeah.
good source as well. So as much as you can of these purple foods, they're also very potent antioxidants. So
Right.
they're not going to do any harm either in that respect. So all those, they can really help. But some people maybe make beetroot soup or drink a glass of beetroot juice, or eat a like a small beetroot daily in a salad or something like that. And again, at the very least, doing that 2 weeks before transfer and 2 weeks after can really, really help. But again, these foods are going to be beneficial throughout your reproductive journey, because good blood flow to the reproductive organs means good oxygen delivery, good nutrient delivery to the reproductive organs. So they're going to be beneficial the whole way through. But yes, for example, if you don't like them a lot, just focusing on the 2 weeks. There's actually a berry called the Haskapa berry, which is related, kind of similar to the blueberry. And you can buy a lovely powder made from that berry. And you can add it to porridge or smoothies or something. And I recommend that a lot with clients as a way to kind of get this in, get their purple foods in every day, because it's a really easy, you can actually, it comes in a powder form, and you can make it into a cold drink or a hot drink. It doesn't have to be added to food. So it could be made into like a cup of tea or something. And that's a lovely way to get this purple food in every day, which I would use a lot with clients.
And is that a specific brand as well, or doesn't
It's a
matter?
specific brand, but it's actually, the berry itself is called the Haskap berry. It's from Scandinavia, and then the brand is Haskapa, and they make a powdered form that you can buy. And it's very handy because you've got it there in the cupboard. If you run
Right.
out of fresh blueberries or you run out of fresh beetroot, it's always there, so you can make sure, similar to the hibiscus tea, you can have it in the cupboard, the whole day, the whole time, it doesn't go off. So
Thank you for sharing. Of course, speaking more about frozen embryo transfer with the foods as well, there's sometimes a concern, should we eat only warm foods or cold foods? Again, this is stuff on the internet, but it's a common question and concern for people preparing for frozen embryo transfer. So it does really matter. Should we not eat anything cold while you're...
Yeah, I've heard that, and as far as I know, I think that might be an approach kind of recommended by traditional Chinese medicine. So it wouldn't be something I'm personally trained in, but I can maybe understand the you know the the sort of the thinking behind it, that if you're eating lots of cold foods, your your body's, maybe like your digestion is cold, and then your body has to divert a lot of um blood flow to the digestion, maybe away from the reproductive organs or something like that.
Right.
And I do think that in an approach to your fertility health, I mean, a combination of complementary therapies, like maybe a traditional Chinese approach, and your nutrition, they can all be beneficial, and they can work together as well. So whereas it might not be sort of the top of the list of the recommendations I would give a client, I can understand where it's coming from. And I do generally recommend, for clients, like, I'm a fan of acupuncture to support fertility, and I think that works quite well together with the nutritional approach. So thinking of like keeping warming, and because the idea is in traditional Chinese medicine that you keep your womb warm, and lovely like circulation to the womb. I can see where it comes from. So I don't think there's anything wrong. I do think that it would be taking it a bit too far to think, oh, you don't eat any cold foods. Like maybe, because it can be great to have a salad, alongside, a meal. But maybe if it was like, if breakfast, lunch, and dinner, everything on your plate was cold, that might be a bit too much, or you're drinking lots of very cold water or, iced drinks and iced, iced
Right.
tea, iced coffee, it might be too much. So I think, there's probably a bit of sort of sense to the recommendation. So yeah, maybe just try and make sure not everything's cold. You're not exclusively eating cold foods. Could be beneficial.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking on that. I think it helps a lot of people just to
Yeah.
have a better understanding that, just having a good balance is the way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, apart from diet, of course, another area of concern or worry is also the vaginal microbiome. So is this really true that this is an area that we should also be paying attention to as well as the diet?
Yes, definitely. It's a really emerging area of kind of concern in sort of overall fertility health, but specifically when it comes to embryo transfer or conception implantation. So people might be familiar with the gut microbiome, which is the population of good bacteria that live within our digestive system and support our digestive system. But we are now beginning to understand that other areas of our body have their own microbiomes, such as our vagina. And having a healthy population in our vaginal microbiome is very important for, and we're starting to understand, very important for controlling inflammation in that sort of locally in the vaginal area, and also promoting conception. So there's a lot of we're kind of it's very early days, but we're starting to go down the road of research into sort of the characteristics of your vaginal microbiome, how healthy it is, and chances of healthy implantation, healthy conception, and kind of early pregnancy. It's a very one real positive is it's a very straightforward test, just so that you take a vaginal microbiome swab, send it away, and you get your results back relatively quickly. And it's also usually something that's quite straightforward to address if it's out of balance. So if, for example, you do the test and there's a finding that you have some pro-inflammatory bacteria, and we would call them kind of like the bad bacteria. There's too many bad bacteria there, as opposed to the good bacteria that keep everything healthy. You can address that, take, either an antibiotic or some supplements, try and get rid of the bad bacteria, and then try and boost the good bacteria. It is such a crucial thing to be aware of and to support on your fertility journey, trying to conceive, but something that is so straightforward and relatively easy to address that I think it's such an important thing that we're not really looking at, and it's not common knowledge, but it is starting to become more widely addressed, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. So what can we do then to try to support the vaginal microbiome? Is it something that we should be eating, or should we be doing some testing?
Well, definitely, I always start with the testing, because you may not have any symptoms that your vaginal microbiome is out of balance, that you've got bad bacteria there. You can have high levels of certain bacteria, such as strep B, and you can have no symptoms whatsoever. You can have low levels of good bacteria, and signs that your vaginal microbiome might be out of balance, or are things like recurring thrush, recurring UTIs, discharge, itchiness in the vaginal area, or if you have a history of heavy antibiotic use, or have been using maybe some medications long term. If you've had your gallbladder removed, all these things can impact the microbiomes in the body. So if that's the case, again, quite a few of those things are red flags that your vaginal microbiome might be out of balance. But again, it's really a straightforward area to support if you know what's going on in the vaginal microbiome. So it can be supplementation with specific probiotics. So a probiotic is a supplement that's a capsule that's really filled with lots of good bacteria. So a bit like the good bacteria that's in a yogurt, but really, right, if you imagine like huge concentrations of that good bacteria. So you can take probiotic supplements, but then diet has a big part to play in maintaining the microbiomes around the body. So fermented food, such as like live yogurt and kefir, fermented dairy, that provides good bacteria to the body that can help maintain a healthy vaginal microbiome. So that's another reason why I don't cut out dairy unnecessarily, because you would be, reducing your ability to maybe introduce those really good, healthy fermented dairy foods. Things like sauerkraut, kombucha, all these fermented foods are becoming quite trendy, but they have real health benefits from our body. You also want to be eating like a wide variety of fruits and vegetables, plant foods, look after our microbiome. And then it's also important like what you're avoiding. So nicotine, for example, has been shown to reduce good bacteria levels in the vaginal microbiome. So if you are smoking or vaping, or maybe being exposed to secondhand, smoke, all those things could potentially, interestingly have a bad impact on your microbiome. Chlorine in tap water has been shown to have a negative impact. So we would always want to filter tap water or drink mineral water. That can have a really positive impact. So it's a big picture. I usually say start with the testing. Some people who can't afford the testing just like to maybe take a vaginal probiotic supplement, which is another way to maybe support transfer. And I would usually recommend that for at least 2 or 3 months prior to transfer to make sure you've got a healthy vaginal microbiome. So lots you can do, and it really, as I said, it depends on the person and their medical history and their background, if there's been factors that might have affected the vaginal microbiome too.
Thank you. And for that vaginal probiotic, is there anyone in particular that you would recommend?
There's a few different companies that produce supplements. The company that I tend to recommend the product with is actually the company that can provide the testing in the UK, which is Invivo. So they will provide the testing kit, and then they also have supplements you can use afterwards to treat as well.
Okay. And so for people that might be listening and wanting to get the test done, or perhaps explore further if this is something they need, what is the best way to approach that? Do they reach out to you, or?
You have to go through a practitioner. You can't just log on and order a test kit yourself, because then you would need practitioner support after test results to sort of get the most out of them. So you can contact someone like myself, or register anyone who's registered with Invivo as a practitioner, and they can organize the test kit for you.
Okay. And what's the best way to reach out to you?
For me, you can reach out kind of directly to me through like Instagram or Facebook, social media. And I think you have my contact details.
Yeah, I'll put the details as well.
Ola, so that is another thing you can do.
I put in the show notes so people can reach out. And in terms of general supporting probiotic, is there anyone that you would also recommend that people take in general?
Yeah, I mean, there are also very good quality like pregnancy probiotics on the market now, so you can use them prior to transfer, and then ideally throughout pregnancy you can keep going. A brand called OptiBac do a really good pregnancy probiotic as well. So that's another one that's on the market too that I think is brilliant.
Okay, so basically, I mean, you said in terms of diet supplement, we should be looking about 3 months, and then the vaginal microbiome as well is something that we should be looking at and around the same time, and of course get the testing done if there's any issues, and that can be treated with the right probiotics. And then do they then do another testing after the probiotic, or once that initial testing is done and then you take the probiotic, you're good to go?
I guess the testing follow-up would depend on what was found in the results. So if you find, for example, just a good example is a bacteria called strep B. Is often not found in women until maybe sort of they are pregnant, sometimes because there is screening for it sometimes in the later stages of pregnancy. But there is some emerging research indicating that if you have strep B present, it can impact the chances of implantation and could be a risk factor for early miscarriage. So if that was one that you found on the testing, generally the way I would address that with clients is that I would write a letter to their GP. They would go with the test results to their GP or their consultant, if they're having maybe IVF, the consultant that they're working with, who would then recommend antibiotic to get rid of the strep B. And we would then usually sometimes use a probiotic as well to protect. But generally you do want to check again at a later stage to make sure that the strep B is gone. Sometimes because you've had a historic result of strep B being present, the doctor will then test again your GP or your consultant. So sometimes then you don't have to test for, retest for strep B privately. Because you have had a history of it. Your doctor will keep an eye on that sort of during kind of your pregnancy fertility journey, because it could be problematic. So that, just an example of a client that I've worked with, who we found that she had strep B. Her IVF clinic that she was working with then were able to prescribe the antibiotics once I forwarded the test results to them with a cover letter. They prescribed the antibiotics. She also used a probiotic concurrently. She had her transfer, got pregnant, but then during pregnancy, her clinic continued to screen for strep B to make sure that it didn't come back. So, and then she could, if it did, antibiotics would be available again. So that's just one example. I guess it's quite difficult to know. It would really be dependent on what the results showed when they came back,
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Just on a note, like sometimes some bacteria show up that are maybe slightly different to strep B, and generally you can keep those bad bacteria under control just simply with a probiotic. So for some clients, it's just enough to just use a probiotic throughout pregnancy and in the run up to transfer, and they just keep going with the probiotic, and maintaining a healthy, good bacteria levels is enough to kind of keep the bad bacteria in check. So that's sometimes that's all you have to do really is keep going with the probiotic.
Thanks so much for sharing. I think it's really, I think for anyone listening, it does really help to listen to you speak about the diet and, things to eat, not to eat, perhaps certain teas that can be beneficial and probiotics. And of course, this really important area, the vaginal microbiome as well. And just to stress that as well, this is important even if you're trying to conceive without fertility treatments. This is something that you should be looking at anyway as well, regardless of IVF or not.
Yeah, definitely. I was actually talking to a client about it just a few days ago, and I said if I was kind of doing my fertility journey again, and I conceived naturally, I would have tested this. But back then, whenever I had my child, it wasn't really as sort of widely available. It would have been very difficult to find the services. But if it was me doing it all over again, this would have been one of the first tests I would have done, for myself.
Right. Thank you for sharing. Is there anything else that you'd like to share in terms of preparation for frozen embryo transfer that you might have come across? Because again, I think for many people, there's a lot of information preparing for egg retrieval, right? Eat right, do this right. But then somehow I think people feel like they can relax and not worry so much because the embryo is already ready and that you're just going to transfer. But of course, the body still has to be prepared as best as possible to receive the embryo and hopefully carry on further to successful pregnancy and birth.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. It's also a really important area. And you're already in a good place. Fantastic. You've got a healthy embryo. You've had healthy egg retrieval. Like that's, you've already kind of overcome one hurdle. But then, then you want to switch your focus to, everything you can do for making sure you're nutritionally ready for pregnancy. As I mentioned, it's really important to have optimal status of certain nutrients like iodine, which supports your thyroid health in early pregnancy. You want to have good levels of vitamin D, you want to have good levels of omega-3. So you want to be making sure, folate, B12, all those. So again, continuing to support and maintain those healthy levels with a good, pregnancy multivitamin, a good quality pregnancy multivitamin. Looking to make sure your diet continues to be good as well, because, if say, for example, oh yeah, you've got a healthy embryo, and you're thinking maybe someone goes off the rails and, oh, I can eat more sugar now, or I can have, again, try to be mindful of those foods can be pro-inflammatory. So, there's a lot of talk about the Mediterranean style diet as being very helpful for egg quality, but it's also really good at controlling kind of inflammation, keeping inflammation levels down. So, all those fruits and vegetables that are rich in antioxidants, that also helps to keep your inflammation levels healthy. Olive oil, lots of all those really, nutritious foods. It's also going to help your your ability for conception,
Right.
implantation, and then, you know, early pregnancy and further on during the pregnancy. So it's really important. You just have to shift your focus slightly and think about all these other things that could be relevant and then can also support you know, that next stage of of the pregnancy journey, essentially. So it's I'm just thinking of anything that I haven't mentioned that could be kind of relevant. It's really, as I said, you know, focusing in on those key nutrients, making sure there's enough, and controlling inflammation. So a lot of the nutritional, like a lot of the nutritional guidance that you've probably followed for egg quality, it still stands, you know,
Yeah.
at this point. It just maybe has different benefits for the body.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. Actually, one question that I forgot to ask was about also talking about the diet and what to eat. Because sometimes people say that I eat a lot of fiber, and that's
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
And you have some people that are concerned about there's certain cookies or biscuits that have a lot of fiber, but of course, biscuit is still
Sugar.
yeah, sugar. So should that be eliminated or should be significantly reduced?
Sugar should definitely be reduced because it's going to be too much sugar is going to be pro-inflammatory. And I also think if you're eating lots of sugar, you know, for example, as snacks, you're kind of missing opportunities to get more nutritious food in as snacks and things as well. You know, I'm a big fan of dark chocolate, like a square of dark chocolate, like high cocoa content, at least 75% cocoa. That actually can help with blood flow. So, you know, if you did want a sweet treat after a meal, a square of dark chocolate might have actual benefits at this point. But yes, there is actually, you know, you mentioned their fiber, high fiber foods. There is some evidence that they can help. You know, a high fiber diet can help implantation and can support a healthy endometrium lining. And I guess whole grains like whole grain oats or brown rice, things like that are actually very nutritious and the source of maybe nutrients like vitamin E, which are known to help support the endometrium. And actually, I don't think we talked about vitamin E. Vitamin E rich foods are very good. So avocado, olive oil, olives, nuts and seeds, whole grains from vitamin E are really important foods as well. And again, some research that got lots of vitamin E can support the endometrium. So yeah, it's a big picture, but you know, I love going back to the Mediterranean diet because it kind of ticks all the boxes of, you know, whole grains, lots of fruits and veg, no real pro-inflammatory foods, herbs and spices which are anti-inflammatory. You know, if you're in doubt, go with the Mediterranean diet. That would be kind of a really my one takeaway kind of message.
Right. And I think it's also important not to be confused that, because again, talking about the fiber and the biscuits, I think people sometimes you see certain foods that might be originally not a good idea, but then because you see that he has things like, I don't know, fiber, or he has something that you think is good, then you keep eating it because you think of the fiber as opposed to what it actually is, right? So a cookie is still a cookie, regardless of the fact that it has high fiber.
Yeah, I mean, because it's still gonna it's kind of going to be like a processed food.
Right.
So, you know, if you wanted to kind of make your own homemade like low sugar something like flapjacks or something, that would be great as like a high fiber snack.
Wow.
But really it should be like kind of whole grains in your meals, or you know, at breakfast time is your best way to get fiber. I mean, I'm also a huge fan of beans and lentils as a source of fiber in the diet.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't eat enough, they don't like them, or they think they don't know how to cook them. And just such a really great nutritious food when you're trying to conceive, you know, and really lots and lots of fiber. Brilliant food to include in your
Thank
diet.
you. Thank you for sharing that. And then you mentioned avocados. What about, so you talked about fish, oily fish that could be problematic, and you know, taking the supplements. What about salmon? Is that something that you can eat on a weekly basis, or is that also categorized as part of the oily fish?
So that would count as an oily fish. So generally, if you are going to have a serving of oily fish, one serving a week maximum.
Okay.
Less, if you are going to choose oily fish, the smaller the fish, the better, because it's less likely to have toxins. So if you do love your oily fish, sardines are a better option, mackerel, but again, you don't go beyond one serving a week because of the concerns of possibly heavy metals. So whitefish, is a better option because it's less likely to have heavy metals and toxins from the sea stored. Oily fish tends to store those toxins at a higher level. And it's also another reason why I don't recommend cod liver oil as your source of omega-3 fats, because it comes from the liver of the fish where there could be toxins. So it is the one place where I say, unfortunately, you can't get enough omega-3 from the diet when you're following these guidelines. So we do need to use a good high quality supplement.
Right. And thank you for clarifying that, because cod liver oil used to be highly promoted, I believe, for fertility, but now we should be making more an omega-3 supplements.
Yeah, omega-3 fish oil that doesn't come from the liver.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. There's so much to know, right, for people. And again, having someone that is qualified, like yourself, that is fully aware of what's right and what's not appropriate is really important, because there's so much information out there. And oftentimes people are just confused and not sure who to reach out for the right information and right support as they prepare for their fertility, for transfers, or just trying for conception without fertility treatments. So thank you so much for answering all of our many questions, and always being so passionate and focused on raising awareness and supporting people. It really is helpful, because there's so many people that are able to listen to this podcast and listen to you answering all those questions and feel better informed, and even can reach out to you for more support and guidance as they navigate their journeys towards parenthood.
I do think, unfortunately, I do see so many people sitting in front of me for a consultation, and they are so confused with the amount of information that's out there. It is, a complete minefield. And, even I find sort of the amount of information that's comes through on social media and online overwhelming. And I know how to wade through it, and I know how to kind of decipher what to sort of go with. So I can understand why my clients and people that are out there like trying to educate themselves are just so confused.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming back here the second time.
No, it's lovely to talk to you again,
to speak to us, and to answer many of our questions about, again, fertility and frozen embryo transfer and vaginal microbiome. It's really helpful to have that information and to be able to reach out to you for testing and for support. Thank you for all that you do, and look forward to having you again in the near future.
Yeah, that would definitely be something there's definitely other topics we could cover.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Thank you so much for your time.
No worries. Thank you.